Hi, you're watching the Daily News Simplified with me, Ankit. And in today's DNS, that is 23rd of December, we have picked up, sorry, we have picked up six different articles. The first article on the day is on the Sahitya Academy Awards. Because the Executive Board of Sahitya Academy, it has approved awards for the year 2023. So, in a scope of our today's discussion, we will take a look at what are these Sahitya Academy Awards. The second article on the day is on the issue of rare earth elements. Because China, which is the world's top producer of rare earth materials, it has banned exports of technologies which are used to extract and separates these strategic metals. Hence, this rare earth element will be the subject of our today's discussion. The third article on the day is on Bhagat Singh because recently breach was conducted in the Indian Parliament, and the persons who were accused of this breach, they cited a historical example of Bhagat Singh, who back in 1920s he threw a bomb in the Central Legislative Assembly, which now is the Lok Sabha. Now the fourth article of the day is on PM-DevINE Scheme because central government it yesterday hold a virtual meeting with CM of all northeastern states for implementation of various infrastructural schemes, and one of the schemes was this PM-DevINE Scheme. Hence, we will go into detail about the intricacies of this particular scheme. Then, we will move to our main centric discussion. The first article is on the issue of border management. Because the Eastern Army Commander, Lieutenant General Kalita, he had flagged concerns regarding Myanmar or how the influx of migrants are taking place from Myanmar into Indian territory. And the second mains related article is on credit rating agencies. Because recently the Finance Ministry of Union Government it published a document which was titled as Reimagining Narratives. And in this document, the first essay, it is on the issues with respect to methodologies that are adopted by these credit rating agencies, as these methodologies, according to India's Finance Ministry, they are opaque and non-transparent. And the gaps that are there in the methodologies, it has negatively affected India's interest. Hence, these credit rating agencies will be the subject of our today's discussion in the main centric article. Now, before moving forward, let me emphasize the need to like and share this video with your fellow aspirants. Further, if you want to stay updated regarding all our future videos, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Hence, let us start with this first article of the day that appeared in page 8 of the Hindu newspaper. Now, this article reports that the recently Sahitya Academy Awards were announced for the year 2023. Also, these awards are important from prelims perspective. Hence, let us discuss what are these Sahitya Academy Awards. Now, the Sahitya Academy, it is India's autonomous body which functions under Ministry of Culture. Now, this autonomous body, it is also India's National Academy of Letters. And this body, it honors writers who have given outstanding contributions in India's 22 languages that are mentioned in Schedule 8th of the Indian Constitution, as well as 2 more languages that are English and Rajasthani. Hence, this award is given for people based on their achievements in 24 languages that are 22 8 scheduled languages as well as English and Rajasthani. Now, this award is given in a form of cash reward of rupees 1 lakh as well as a copper plaque which features the word Sahitya is given to the award winners. Now, this is the second highest literary award in the Indian society, and it follows the Jnanpith Award, which we'll deal with on later. Now, the Sahitya Academy, it also rewards achievements based on the fellowship. As this fellowship, it is extended to people who have given a significant contribution based on these 24 languages. And this distinction, that is fellowship, which is awarded again by the Sahitya Academy, it is the greatest distinction and even greater than this Sahitya Academy Award. Further, the institution, that is Sahitya Academy, it also rewards people through this Bhasha Samman Award. As this Bhasha Samman, it is given to people who have achieved something in other languages that are other than these 24 languages, and specifically it is given to people who have given literature examples in classical as well as medieval literature. The Sahitya Academy, it also awards what are known as translation awards. As these translation awards are given to people who have given a significant work in translating literature from other languages into these 24 languages. Further, there is also another important award, and this award is known as Gyanpith Award, which is given by an organization known as Bharatiya Gyanpith. Now, this Gyanpith Award, it is the oldest as well as the highest literary honor which is given to a person in India. Now, this particular award, it is given in 22 languages which are there in 8th schedule of the Indian Constitution. However, this Sahitya Academy Award and Gyanpith Award, it is given only to persons who are living, which means these awards are not given posthumously. Hence, let us now solve the practice question which we have curated on Sahitya Academy, and this particular question is important from prelims perspective because a question back in the year 2021, it appeared on Bharat Ratna and Padma Awards. Hence, let us consider this model question. The first statement, it says that the Sahitya Academy Award is the country's highest literary award conferred by the government of India. Now, from the above discussion, I can say that it is the Gyanpith Award which is the highest literary award in the India. Hence, this first statement is incorrect because Sahitya Academy Award is the second highest literary award. Now, the second statement, it says that the Bhasha Samman is awarded to writers who are contributing to Hindi literature only. Again, this statement is incorrect because Bhasha Samman is given to writers who have given a significant contribution in languages which are other than the 24 languages which are covered by Sahitya Academy Awards. Hence, this Bhasha Samman statement is also incorrect. The third statement, that is Sahitya Academy Award, it acknowledges writers contributing in 22 languages mentioned in Constitution as well as English and Rajasthani. Now, this third statement is correct because I have already highlighted that Sahitya Academy, it awards writers based on their contribution in 24 languages. The 22 languages are mentioned in the 8th schedule of the Indian Constitution, whereas English and Rajasthani works, they are also awarded. Hence, the total amount of languages which are covered by Sahitya Academy Awards, these are 24 languages. Now, from the above discussion, we can say that option A is the correct answer, whereas the answer to this PYQ is option D. Now, with this, let us move to the second article of the day, which appeared in the Hindu newspaper. Now, this article reports that the China, which is the world's largest processor of rare earth elements, it has banned the export of technologies which are used to extract and process these strategic materials. Hence, this topic, that is rare earth elements, it is important from exams point of view, specifically because UPSC in GS paper 1, it highlights distribution of key natural resources across the world. And these rare earth elements which are used in our electronic devices, these are key natural resources which will be profound in the development of digital technologies. Now, what are these rare earth elements? Now, these rare earth elements are a set of 17 elements which are present in the periodic table. For example, scandium as well as yttrium as well as these 15 lanthanides, they comprise what are known as rare earth elements. Now these rare earth elements, they are used in our electronic devices such as cell phones as well as computers. For example, the speakers which of our mobile phones, they have magnets, and these magnets are produced by rare earth elements. Further, our display of our smartphones, they also carry or utilize various rare earth elements. Hence, you can realize the importance of these rare earth elements in forwarding the digital technologies, especially manufacturing of cell phones and computers. However, the distribution or mining of these rare earth elements, it is concentrated in China alone. Back in 1993, China was only responsible for about 33% of total extraction and processing of these rare earth elements. Whereas on the other hand, United States, it also produced, China result was responsible for 38% of total extraction, whereas US, it was responsible for 33% of total extraction of rare earth elements back in the year 1993. However, from the year 2011, China is responsible for more than 90% of these rare earth elements and their processing. Now, this percentage has also increased to almost 97%. So you can see the distribution as well as processing of these rare earth elements is concentrated especially with the China country. Hence, this creates further challenges with respect to resilience of the supply chain with respect to these rare earth elements. Now we have curated a practice question based on these rare earth metals. And this is because UPSC in this year's prelims, that was 2023, it asked a question related to one of the most important strategic metals, that is cobalt. Hence let us consider this model question. The first statement, these rare earth elements, there are only 17 rare earth elements in the periodic table, which we know from this discussion is a correct statement because there are 17 rare earth elements which comprises of 15 lanthanides as well as scandium and yttrium. Hence this first statement is a correct statement. The second statement, it states that China accounted for more than 90% of total global production of rare earth elements, which we know for the fact is a correct statement because China, it accounts for almost 97% of total production of these rare earth elements. The third statement, it states that China is promoting the export of production technology for rare earth metals and their alloy materials. Again, from our today's news discussion, it is quite clear that China is rather inhibiting the export of technologies which are utilized for production of rare earth elements. Thereby, this third statement is incorrect. Hence, the correct answer to this model question is option B, whereas the answer to this PYQ was C, as Congo is responsible for 3/4 of world's cobalt production. Now moving on to this third prelims related article of the day, which appeared in page 22 of the Indian Express newspaper. Now the Bhagat Singh is in news because recently there was a breach in Indian Parliament, and the persons who were responsible of this breach, they cited a historical example that back in 1929, Bhagat Singh and his associate, that was Batukeshwar Dutt, they threw a bomb in the Central Legislative Assembly, and their purpose to throw this bomb was to make the loud voice of this bomb to make the deaf colonial rule to hear. And these particular historical example, it was cited or misused by the miscreants, that was Parliament miscreants. Now, Bhagat Singh is an important figure in the Indian national movement, and this is also important from UPSC perspective because GS1 paper syllabus, it deals with modern Indian history, and significant personalities. Now let us take a look at Bhagat Singh and his impact on India's national movement. Now Bhagat Singh, he was born back in the year 1907, and he was born in a place which is now located in Pakistan. Now you can see that he was born in a year, especially when the Indian national movement for independence, it was in its nascent stage. Now the influence of Bhagat Singh, it can be gauged from three factors. The first is education, because Bhagat Singh, he received in his education in National College of Lahore, which was constituted during the time of non-cooperation movement. Further, he was also educated in Dayanand Anglo-Vedic High School, which was DAV, and this both institutions, they highlight that he was educated in institutions which were closely related to Indian national movement. Further, his uncle, that was Ajit Singh, he was also a freedom fighter. As he was involved in progressive politics, particularly he participated in canal colonialization bill agitation as well as Gadar movement, which took place between 1914 and 1915. Further, when he was in this national college which was in Lahore, he participated or he also agreed with the non cooperation movement that was brought forward by Mahatma Gandhi. However, when this non cooperation movement was withdrawn by Mahatma Gandhi in its earlier stage, then this became a sense of agitation with Bhagat Singh, because he felt that it was more important for a revolutionary movement rather than a mass movement to achieve the ends of Indian independence. Hence, gradually, he shifted towards more of a revolutionary kind of a movement. Further, Bhagat Singh, he was also influenced by many important events. For example, there was this Jallianwala Bagh massacre which happened in 1919, and Bhagat Singh, he lost close associates. Further, he was also aggrieved by the violence which was subjected to unarmed protesters that was happened in Nankana Sahib back in the year 1921. Hence, you can see Bhagat Singh gradually from non-cooperation movement, he moved towards more of a revolutionary kind of a movement. And this is very much visible in his associations. For example, Bhagat Singh, he became a member of Hindustan Republican Association, which was founded by Sachindranath Sanyal as well as Chandrasekhar Azad. However, he also established Bharatiya Naujawan Bharatiya Sabha, which was established in the year 1926. Further, he also published articles in the magazine Kirti, which published workers and protesters party. Further, along with his associates, that was Sukhdev and Rajguru, Bhagat Singh, he also formed a Hindustan Socialist Republican Association, which was responsible for bombing in Central Legislative Assembly. Also, Bhagat Singh, he participated in various forms of armed revolution. For example, Bhagat Singh, he participated in Kakuri train robbery, which happened in 1927. Further, in the year 1928, he was responsible for assassination of Saunders, who was a policeman, and as he was responsible for lathi charge on a crowd, which eventually led to death of Lala Lajpat Rai. Further, as in the news article I've already highlighted, Bhagat Singh was involved in bombing of Central Legislative Assembly along with his associate, that was Batukeshwar Dutt. However, slowly by gradually, after he was jailed, because of this incident, Bhagat Singh tilted more towards a mass movement. As his later literature, it favors importance of mass movement as against revolutionary struggle, which is there for independence of any colonial country. Hence, let us consider the model question which we have curated on Indian freedom movement. And the first question, it states, Initially, Bhagat Singh, he did not conform with the non-cooperation movement of Mahatma Gandhi, which we know is an incorrect statement because as Bhagat Singh was educated in National College of Lahore, he agreed with the national non-cooperation movement in its earliest stage. However, when this movement was prematurely dissolved by Mahatma Gandhi, then he became aggrieved with these mass movements and he became oriented more towards revolutionary struggles. Hence, this first statement again is incorrect. Now, the second statement, that is Bhagat Singh and Chandrasekhar Azad founded the Hindustan Republican Association in 1924, which again is an incorrect statement because it was Chandrasekhar Azad who formed this Hindustan Republican Association along with Sachindra Sanyal and not Bhagat Singh. Hence, the answer to this model question is option D. Whereas the PYQ is concerned, here option C was the correct answer. Now let us move to this last prelims oriented article of the day, which appeared on page 10 of the Hindu newspaper. Now this article highlights that the ministry of central government, it has held meeting with CMs of various northeastern states over the implementation of various schemes, and it particularly emphasizes on PM Development in Northeastern Region scheme. Now we'll discuss with this scheme because this scheme aims to implement inclusive growth, which is an important part of GS paper 3 syllabus. Now what is this PM-DevINE scheme? Now this PM, that is Development Initiative for Northeast, it is a central sector scheme. Thereby, the funding of this scheme, it is fully provided by the central government. Now the nodal ministry of this scheme is Ministry of Development of Northeast, which is also known as Donor Ministry. And this scheme, it is implemented by Northeastern Council. Now the total budgetary allocation for this scheme is rupees 6,600 crores. And this scheme is particularly utilized for infrastructure development with the spirit of PM Gati Shakti initiative. Further, this scheme, it also emphasizes support for development of social infrastructure, which is particularly essential for development of northeastern region of our country. Further, this scheme, it also supports livelihood activities, especially with respect to youth and women. And this scheme, it is aimed to fill the development gaps that exist in northeastern region. And this scheme, it aims to complement and not replace the existing schemes that are there for northeastern region. Hence, you can see that this scheme is a complementary and not a scheme that wants to replace the existing schemes. Hence, let us consider the model question. And why are we asking this model question in the first place? It is because the issue of infrastructure and various government methods, it has been asked by UPSC before. Hence, this question on National Investment and Infrastructure Fund, it appeared in the prelims of the year 2017. Hence, let us consider a model question on PM-DevINE initiative. The first statement, it says that it is a central sector scheme, which we know for the fact is a correct statement because 100% funding to this scheme, it is provided by the union government. Now the second statement, it says that the objective of this scheme is the socio-economic development of the tribes in Northeast, which is an incorrect statement because this scheme wants to undertake infrastructure development and not just relates to the tribes that exist in Northeast. Further, the third statement, it states that the scheme will replace existing central and state schemes for development of Northeast, which again is an incorrect statement because this scheme is a complementary and not a replacement of existing schemes. Hence, from the above discussion, we can safely conclude that option A is the correct answer. Whereas answer to the PYQ is concerned, here option D was the correct answer. Now let us move to the first mains related discussion of the day. And this discussion is on India's regions because the Lieutenant General Kalita, who is in charge of India's eastern deployment, he has highlighted that the influx of migrants from Myanmar, it poses challenge to the Indian social, political as well as economic infrastructure. Now this topic, that is border management, it is important from UPSC perspective, especially with respect to mains. And it is because UPSC GS paper 3 syllabus, it highlights security challenge and their management in border areas. Further, a question which are related to effective border area management, it appeared in the mains of the year 2020. So you can see that India's border regions, especially with respect to northern, western as well as eastern regions, it is important from exams perspective because developments all around these borders, they appear in the news throughout the year. Further, India is also involved in border disputes with two of its neighbors, that is Pakistan in the west as well as China in the northern region. Now, why are we discussing with especially with Indian borders? Because as you can see from this diagram, India has almost India has more than 15,000 kilometers of border which are land borders. Whereas, as far as coastal borders are concerned, India has more than 7,500 kilometers of coastal borders. Hence, management of these almost 22.5 thousand kilometers of borders, it is very much essential for India's security perspective. Further, India has borders, especially land borders, with Pakistan in the west, Afghanistan and China in the north, which and it also has borders with Nepal and Bhutan. Whereas on the eastern side, India borders Bangladesh as well as Myanmar. Further, as far as India's maritime borders are concerned, India has a border with Sri Lanka. Now, why are we discussing these borders in the first place? Because traditionally, borders are seen as a barrier. And these barriers, they are very much essential for protecting any country's territorial integrity. Because if we are not able to protect our borders, then terrorists or other migrants, they can come into our Indian territory. Further, these borders, they are also utilized for moving of illegal contraband, that is drugs, as well as movement of illegal persons, especially human trafficking as well as animal trafficking. Hence, the traditional view is that these borders, they act as a barrier which protects any country's sovereign or security interest. Whereas there's an evolving tendency which sees these borders as a bridge. Especially many European countries, they witness borders as an opportunity to create or to facilitate the movement of people. Because when movement of people across the border takes place, it furthers or it improves the level of trade as well as connectivity with any two countries. However, this idea of bridging borders, acting as a bridge between two countries, cannot be implemented, especially in Southern Asia. Because India currently it has borders with two of its hostile neighbors. As again, I've highlighted that India has a border with Pakistan, which is a hostile or enemy country. Further, India also borders China in the north, which is again is a hostile country. Hence, in order to implement this idea of bridge, significant development it needs to be conducted before we can translate the idea of borders from barriers to bridges. Now, what are the challenges that plagues Indian borders in general? Let us take a look at these challenges in the next slide. Now, first of all, Indian borders or borders which are there in southern Asia, it is generally undefined or unsettled in nature. because primarily India's borders, they were demarcated based on human activities. As Indian borders, especially with that of Pakistan as well as Bangladesh, it was created during the time of partition, and it was done based on recommendation of Radcliffe Commission. And this created a kind of a border which ignored the long standing cultural and economic relations between the people in these areas. Hence, because of these artificial nature of borders, especially with respect to Pakistan and Bangladesh, this has created a sense of undefined or unsettled border network. Further, India's northeastern region, it borders Myanmar in the northeast, and these two regions, they bear cultural and ideological similarities. Thereby, people, they have relations across the border in Myanmar. Thereby, movement of these people, they are very much essential for their day-to-day lives. However, currently, when there are political boundaries in place, movement of people across the borders, it creates various forms of security challenges. Hence, because of artificial or man-made nature of India's borders, it has created undefined or unsettled borders in nature. Further, India's two primary enemies, that are Pakistan and China, they do not recognize India's claim over, for example, India's claim over Jammu and Kashmir, or India's claim over Arunachal Pradesh. For example, Pakistan, it does not recognize India's sovereignty over erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir. Whereas on the other hand, China, it is involved in land dispute with India, especially with respect to Aksai Chin region, which is located in Ladakh region, as well as it also does not recognize India's control over Arunachal Pradesh. Hence, these undefined borders, especially with Pakistan and China, it has resulted into unsettled Indian borders, especially with respect to Pakistan and China. Now, again, the borders of India, they are located in geographically isolated places. Now, these geographically isolated places, particularly in upper regions of the Himalayas, it leads to isolation of these border areas from Indian mainland. Thereby, these border regions, they witness a low level of infrastructure when you compare them with other popular urban and rural areas in Indian mainland. And this geographical isolation, what it has resulted into creation of economic isolation, because people, they do not have an adequate employment or social opportunities in these border areas. Hence, the people who are living or who inhabit these border areas, they have not just been geographically isolated, but they have also become economically isolated from the rest of the country. And this economic isolation, it is harnessed or misutilized by the enemies which are there across the border, and they create disturbance in the Indian territory utilizing this particular gaps. Further, the isolation, that is geographic and economic isolation of Indian borders, it also creates challenges with respect to India's security management. As I've already highlighted, Indian borders, they are located in upper regions of Himalayas as well as dense forest of northeastern regions. Hence, creation of infrastructure which facilitates this security management, it is also difficult as far as Indian borders are concerned. And this lack of sufficient infrastructure, it results into difficulties in security management by various security agencies. Further, these areas, they also witness low mobile connectivity. Thereby, whatever security agencies or their employees, they are working in these dense or difficult terrain, they also witness some kind of a social isolation, which also adds to the levels of difficulty which is already faced by these security agencies. Further, India's border, these are both settled as well as unsettled borders. For example, In Jammu and Kashmir, there's an area which is known as line of actual or line of control. And this line of control and line of actual control, which is there with China, it witnesses a dual role or two types of agencies they man India's borders. For example, unsettled borders, that is line of control, and line of actual control, they are manned by Indian Army. Whereas on the other hand, India's settled borders, they are manned by border security forces such as BSF as well as ITBP. Now, naturally, that is Indian Army and the Central Armed Police Forces, they have different objectives. Thereby, these different objectives, what it results? It results into lack of coordination between these two agencies. And this lack of coordination, it further creates disturbances in security management of India's border region. Now coming to India's coastal borders. As I've already highlighted, India has more than 7,500 kilometers worth of coastal borders. And the presence of security forces, especially Indian Navy and Coast Guards, it is comparatively thin when you compare with India's land borders. And this gaps in India's coastal security, it was exploited by Pakistani terrorists back in the year 2008 when they infiltrated into city of Mumbai and created havoc, resulted into deaths of more than 200 innocent civilians. Hence, there are significant gaps in India's coastal security because the state police, it does not have a clear demarcation of its role as far as protection of coastal borders are concerned. Further, Indian borders, they also witness various other issues as well, because presently, especially with respect to northeastern region, India witnesses high amount of illegal migration, which is specifically there with Bangladesh as well as Myanmar. Because disturbances in these two countries, it results into influx of migrants from these countries into Indian territory. And presence of these migrants in Indian territory, it creates whole set of social, political and economic challenges. Because as I've already highlighted, India's northeastern region is somewhat less developed than Indian mainland. And when this socially or economically scarce region, it witnesses huge influx of migrants, it creates scarcity of resources. Further, these illegal migrants, they aim to settle in Indian territory and they also became a huge vote bank which are then favored by various politicians. Hence, not just economic and social disturbances, these migrants, they are also resulting into political differences or disturbances into Indian soil. Further, India also lies in close proximity with world's two most opium produced regions, that are Golden Crescent in the west and Golden Triangle in the east. And these two regions, they are the world's most highest opium producing regions. And opium and drugs from these regions, then they are illegally trafficked into Indian territories by utilization of the porous borders both in western as well as northeastern sectors. Hence, this has created a huge amount of drug problem, which we can witness in state of Punjab as well as various northeastern states. Hence, you can see that India's undefined or unsettled boundaries, it has resulted into various issues with its neighboring countries. Further, India's boundaries, they are located in geographically isolated region. And these geographically isolated region, they also witness some kind of economic isolation because the levels of infrastructure there are insufficient. Further, the management of security in India's borders, it is also a difficult task because of the rugged terrain as well as lack of coordination between various agencies. Further, as far as coastal borders are concerned, India's coastal borders are comparatively less protected than land borders. And these gaps, they were historically utilized by terrorists, especially in the year 2008. Also, India witnesses high amount of illegal migration especially in the Northeast, and it also witnesses increased drug trafficking because of its proximity to Golden Triangle as well as Golden Crescent. Now, how can we resolve or try to minimize these common issues that are there in India's border management? And the first and the most important solution is to dissolve or is to resolve its border dispute that are there, especially with China and that of Pakistan. Because earlier, India was also involved in a border dispute with friendly countries such as Sri Lanka as well as Bangladesh. However, because of the friendly relations with these two countries, India was able to somewhat constructively solve this border issue. And the most recent border issue management, it was resolved with Bangladesh, especially with enactment of 100th Amendment Act, because this amendment act it resulted into transfer of Bangladeshi enclaves which was there in Indian territory to Bangladesh, and a similar exchange was there taken from Indian enclaves which were located in Bangladesh back into Indian territory. However, a similar kind of resolution it is not possible with China and Pakistan because they are hostile nations. Hence, in order to somewhat improve India's border management, it is very much essential to resolve its border dispute with these two countries at the earliest possible time. Further, it is also important that we regulate our borders as far as possible because these borders they are important to facilitate movement of people. Hence, to effectively facilitate the movement of people, it is also important that the country's infrastructure it should also emphasize on preventing illegal migration and other illegal activities that happens in the border regions. Hence, there are two kind of a motive to regulate India's border. The first motive is to improve the levels of trade and movement of local people. However, India has also needs to ensure the security aspect of its border. And to do that, what India needs to do is to develop first infrastructure. As this infrastructure, it should facilitate not just trade and public movement, but it should also focus on the needs of security agencies as well. Further, India also should create police station in these border areas. As these police station zones, they will be responsible for guarding the borders in addition to central armed police forces. Further, it is also important to recognize the role of locals in effective border management because the economic certainty or economic opportunities that we provide to these locals, it is very much important to prevent these locals from involved or getting involved in illegal activities such as human trafficking or drug trade. Thereby, our border regulation should aim to serve two goals. The first, that it should facilitate movement of people and trade, and it should also facilitate the management of borders by security agencies. Hence, infrastructure development, establishing of police stations, and recognizing the role of locals, it is important as far as regulation of borders are concerned. Further, we also need to improve the levels of infrastructure as well as training of India's security forces, particularly with that of Central Armed Police Forces. First of all, these Central Armed Police Forces they should be given a clear role of guarding a particular boundary, and hence one Central Armed Police Force they should be responsible for guarding just one international boundary. Hence, this kind of a role it will help them gain specialization in forms of border management. Further, they should also be involved the use of advanced technologies because these presence of advanced technologies, specifically IR cameras or satellite imagery, it will help these security agencies to effectively manage the border areas, especially in the difficult terrain. Further, training should also be provided to these personnel in order to make them more acceptable of the local situation. Because when the security personnel of border forces, they'll be able to gel and coordinate with the local people, it will help them eventually to guard the border in a much more effective manner. Further, Indian government should also focus on improving its perception management. Because of security agencies and their operations, there are various kinds of grievances that exist within the local population. And these grievances, they are then misutilized by the perpetrators across the border. And hence, when Indian government and its security agencies, they create a positive perception, it will help the government prevent the alienation of the local people. Further, Indian government, it should also look to form a national database of the amount of illegal migration that is there in the country. And hence, a national database will help India estimate the amount of illegal migrants that inhabit Indian territory. And based on this estimated data, India can then involve with discussions with other neighboring countries, and it will effectively help India to deal with illegal border migration. Further, India should also aim to improve the levels or check on the infiltration that happens across the border. And only when India is able to seal its border more effectively, then we'll be able to check illegal migration. Hence, by resolving its border disputes, especially with hostile nations, effectively regulating the borders by two motives: first, to facilitate trade and movement, and also to facilitate the border management by security forces, strengthening the capacity of security forces, having a positive perception management, creating a national database on illegal immigrants will help India manage its border in a more effective manner. Hence, this was all for today's discussion on our first mains related article of the day, that is the issue of border management. And with this, let us move to the second article of the day, which primarily appeared in the Indian Express newspaper, especially in the explained section as well as editorial page. Now, these two articles, they highlight that Indian Finance Ministry, it came up with a document that was titled Reimagining Narratives. And the first essay in this document, it highlights that the credit rating agencies, they are involved in methodologies which are opaque in nature. And when they utilize these methodologies to generate credit rating of various nations, it inherently brings India to certain kind of disadvantage. And why are we dealing with the topic of credit ratings in the first place? Because credit ratings, it is very much essential for any government. Because improved credit rating will decrease the cost of borrowing by the government from foreign sources. Thereby, it helps in recognizing the need of mobilization of resources, especially from foreign markets. And this is an essential part of GS Paper 3 syllabus. Further, a question appeared in the mains of the year 2016, which highlighted the need for FDI for development of Indian economy. And an improved credit rating will further increase the levels of FDI in any economy. Hence, you can see that this topic of credit rating, it is important from mains perspective. Further, the issue of credit ratings, especially by main credit rating companies, it has also been covered in the economic survey of the year 2021, in addition to being covered by Finance Ministry in its latest reimagining narrative document. Hence, this news has been recurring in nature, thereby making it more important from UPSC perspective. Hence, let us understand what are these credit ratings in the first place. Now, these credit ratings, they are brought by these credit rating agencies. For example, there are three important credit rating agencies. These are Modi, Standard and Poor, as well as Fitch. Now, these three credit rating agencies, they bring what is known as credit ratings. And these credit ratings, they are a form of opinion by these credit rating agencies, which assesses the ability of any country or any borrower of how much it is able to return its debt by the issuing authority. Hence, if a country has a good credit rating, it means that the borrowing country will have to pay less interest on its loans. Whereas, on the other hand, if a country or a government has a less credit rating, it will mean that that country will have to pay more amount eh, as far as interest payments are concerned. But however, credit ratings of the government, they are also important for businesses as well. Because if a business, they operate in a country which has a low credit rating, then these businesses, they also have to pay more interest as far as loans are concerned. Thereby, credit ratings of the government, it is not just essential for mobilization of resources for government, but it is also important for mobilization of resources by the businesses. Now, how are these credit ratings defined or determined by these credit rating agencies? Now, these credit rating agencies, they look at economic data as well as political stability in any country to determine the levels of credit ratings. For example, to determine the economic data, these companies, they involve or they utilize publicly available data such as level of foreign exchange or the amount of debt that a country or a government has. And it also calculates the amount of transparency that are there in Indian or any country markets. Further, these companies, they also calculate the amount of political stability that exists in any country. The more political stability an economy is, the higher will be the credit rating of any country. Now, based on these assessments, these companies, they give two kinds of credit ratings. The first kind, it is known as an investment grade credit rating, and this means this particular area. And all these credit ratings which form under investment grade, it means that this covers highest amount of credit rating as well as it also covers credit ratings which demonstrate moderate credit risk. Whereas on the other hand, this is also a speculative grade of credit rating which are given by these companies. And this speculative grade, it means that there is a higher level of default risk with respect to loan, or it also signifies that a country it has already defaulted on their any loan. And these credit ratings, they are also very much important for any government or investor. For example, a higher credit rating, it will make the government more amenable to borrow from global markets. Because if a global market it is investing in any government which has a higher credit rating, it reflects that that government has a higher probability to pay that loan. Further, high credit rating in any economy, it also attracts amount of foreign investment, because these foreign investors, they are looking for economic as well as political stability, and a better credit rating, it signifies just the what these foreign investors are looking forward to. Thereby, to attract foreign investment, any economy or the government, it will want to have a higher amount of credit ratings. Further, these credit ratings, they are also utilized to assess what kind of a political or economic environment is there in a country. Because better the credit rating, it means that the country is witnessing a stable economic and political environment. Also, credit ratings, it is utilized by investors to make an informed decisions, because the credit rating, it highlights what kind of a risk will investors be subjected to, and utilizing the ratings of various governments, these investors, they can calculate where they should invest or what kind of risk they are more acceptable to. Thereby, long-term investors, especially pension funds, as well as insurance funds, they are looking for to invest in areas which has higher credit ratings. However, India has witnessed significant improvement in its economic growth because back in the year 2008, India was world's 12th largest economy, and coming back to 2023, India is now world's 5th largest economy. Hence, a common perception is that India should witness significant improvement in its credit ratings, right? But let me tell you, this is not the case. Why? Because currently India's credit rating back in the year 2008 and also in 2003, it is exactly the same. That is, India, it is just at the lowest possible rating which is there in the investment grade ratings. Hence, Indian government, it is saying that India, by virtue of its increased economic growth, it should have moved up this ladder. However, converse is true because even with significant economic growth, India has witnessed just the same amount of credit rating. And this has created a debate between not just credit rating agencies, but also within the government that how should India have or why should India have a higher credit rating. Now, there is, as I've already highlighted, difference of opinion between credit rating agencies in the first place and government on the other hand, based on what should India's credit rating be. And these credit rating agencies, they have just given in India a credit rating which is just above the speculative grade ratings. And because of the and as per credit rating agencies, India has a high level of debt, and this is because India's credit rating is low. Because as per these credit rating agencies, highest India has the highest level of debt as far as emerging market economies are concerned. Further, according to these credit rating agencies, India's fiscal position has deteriorated in the recent past because due to COVID-19 pandemic, India had to increase its fiscal deficit, and it also the COVID-19 and its lockdown, it also increased India's revenue deficit. And an increase in both fiscal deficit and revenue deficit, it has deteriorated India's fiscal position in a recent term. And according to credit rating agencies, this is a troublesome factor which has resulted into low credit ratings by credit rating agencies. Further, to sustain economic growth during the pandemic period, India gave some kind of a budgetary support, but these budgetary support they were aimed at a near term growth. However, when it comes to supporting the long term growth, India's deteriorating physical position it does not allow India to witness or to give a long term growth perspective. Further, India's policy implementation which has become contracted because India's fiscal position and budgetary support is somewhat limited. Thereby, India's policy implementation, which is particularly important for increased economic growth and infrastructural support, it has also plagued in the recent past. And based on these four factors, the credit ratings agencies they are of the opinion that India is rightly placed in just above speculative grade rating territory. However, Government of India in its recent publications, it has advocated for higher credit rating for India because according to Indian government, India has a zero history of sovereign debt defaults. And even in 1991, when India witnessed a significant balance of payment crisis, even then India did not default on its foreign or sovereign debt obligation. And this has created a positive precedent as far as Indian economy is concerned. Further, in terms of GDP growth and inflation, India is well placed among major economies in the world. Talking about India's GDP growth, India is world's largest major economy currently. Whereas the levels of inflation in Indian economy currently, it is also in the threshold which is perpetrated by the RBI. Hence, as far as macroeconomic stability in terms of GDP growth and inflation is concerned, according to Government of India, India is currently well placed. Further, as far as financial stability of its financial institutions is concerned, Indian banks has been able to reduce their amount of non-performing assets. Further, to improve the amount of non-performing assets, India has also created a National Asset Reconstruction Company Limited. And because of this, India assets that are there in its financial institutions. And this measure, it highlights that India has a high amount of financial stability. Further, in terms of foreign exchange levels are concerned, India in this week it has almost $616 billion of foreign exchange reserve. And this foreign exchange reserve it covers more than 90% of government's debt obligation. Hence, this high level of forex level, according to Indian government, it should also warrant increased credit ratings as far as Indian sovereign ratings are concerned. Further, in the recent 9.5 years, India has also witnessed what is called a political stability. Because from the past 9 years, India is witnessing a majority government which is not politically unstable. And this government, it has specifically focused on improving ease of doing business, implementation of rule of law, as well as reducing the corruption. Hence, because of Indian government and its political stability, India has improved upon ease of doing business, rule of law, and has also reduced their corruption. And because of these factors, that is zero history of sovereign debt defaults, increased or high economic growth, higher financial stability, large amount of forex exchange reserves, as well as high political stability in the Indian economy, it should result into increased credit ratings. However, this has not happened and it has negatively impacted India's economic interest. What are these negative impacts? Let us discuss this in this particular slide. Now, with not improving credit ratings, this has resulted into increased borrowing cost as far as government or company private borrowing is concerned. Further, this increased borrowing cost and non-improvement in credit rating, it has also reduced the amount of investors' confidence that exists on Indian markets. And this reduced confidence may somewhat lead to instability in India's finance markets. Because when the credit rating is not improved of an economy, this might lead to outflow of foreign funds. And this outflow of foreign funds will create instability in Indian stock markets and Indian economy in general. Further, this poor rating it also isolates Indian participants that are banks and corporates from capital markets, because banks they have to spend more on issuing letter of credit to any Indian businesses. Further, when these businesses they have borrowing from foreign country, they also have to pay increased amount of interest. Hence, it negatively affects the interest of Indian banks as well as corporates. Further, it also creates some kind of policy implication, because if the credit ratings of any country is not improved, then that government it becomes solely focused on improving its sovereign credit rating rather than improving its macroeconomic fundamentals. Hence, you can see that due to poor ratings, India has to have or India is witnessing increased amount of its borrowing cost. Further, this poor rating it has also reduced the investors' confidence that exists in Indian markets, which sometimes leads to instabilities in Indian capital markets. Further, this poor rating is also creates disturbances or problems for Indian institutions such as banks as well as corporate sector. Further, it also becomes a cause of concern as far as policy implementation is concerned. Thereby, What are the issues that Indian government has specifically highlighted as far as credit rating agencies are concerned? The first issue is that the credit rating agencies, their methodologies or their workings are opaque and non-transparent in nature. For example, these credit rating agency, specifically Fitch, it emphasizes the levels of foreign ownership in any bank. And if a bank or any bank in a country it has a high level of foreign ownership, the Fitch company it gives that country higher credit rating. However, as far as developing countries, specifically India is concerned, Indian banks they are majority owned by government banks. And because of this government banks, what credit rating agencies feel that these banks they are subjected to political interference. Hence, any country or any economy which has a presence of government owned banks, these credit rating agencies, these economies, they are given a low rating by the credit rating agencies. However, any developing country, it has a high percentage of government owned banks because it wants to increase the levels of financial inclusion. However, when a credit rating agencies, it differentiates between foreign ownership on one hand and government ownership on the other, it goes against the interest of developing countries. And because of this less credit rating for developing countries, what it has resulted into increased borrowing cost for developing countries, which I have already highlighted in the previous slide. Further, in past few years, what we have witnessed that the credit ratings of developing countries they were downgraded more than credit ratings of developed countries. As far as African nations is concerned, almost 56% of African nations they were has witnessed a reduced or decline in their credit rating. However, the same decline in credit rating is only 9% for European nations. Thereby, according to Indian government, these credit rating agencies they downgrade the credit ratings of developing countries more than that of developed countries. And total 95% of all downgrades that have occurred in the recent past, they are done only for developing nations. And because of Indian government, this opaqueness and non-transparency in their functioning, it has resulted into negatively affecting the interest of developing countries. Further, according to Indian government, the credit rating agencies they are also involved in methodologies which are subjective in nature. Let me understand or let me help you understand this with the help of an example. Now, from the screenshot which you can see on your right, there's a composite governance indicator which is given at 21.4% weightage as far as ratings of Fitch is concerned. Now, this composite government governance indicators, it is sourced from World Bank's worldwide governance indicators. And this indicator, it is calculated based on freedom of speech and expression, media freedom, implementation of rule of law, or the amount of corruption. However, this government indicators it is given a higher weightage rather than economic fundamentals such as macroeconomic fundamentals, public finances or external finances are concerned. Hence, this governance based indicator according to Indian government it is based on subjective terms such as calculating of freedom of speech and expression, media freedom, rule of law or corruption. Because these criterias they are not objective in nature and there is no available metric from which any agencies can calculate or determine the amount objectively. Hence, when these subjective terms, which is given a 21.4% weightage, it is utilized to calculate a country's credit rating, it goes against the amount of objectivity which is required in any assessment. Hence, according to Indian government, these subjective methodologies they override the objective methodologies, and it again goes against the interest of developing nations. Hence, because of opaqueness and their non-transparent functioning, as well as utilization of subjective methodologies in calculation of credit ratings, the interest of developing nations is in decline. And this has created a sense of grievances as far as Indian government is concerned. Thereby, what should be the way forward as far as the credit rating agencies are concerned? Now, the first need for any credit rating agency is to reduce the amount of subjectivity that it utilizes in calculation of credit ratings. And when the credit ratings they are more objective in nature, it will mean that any rating will be more acceptable to the borrower. Thereby, first requirement is to reduce the amount of subjectivity. Further, with any credit ratings, what these credit rating agencies should do, that it should give guidance or insights to any country. Because when a guidance or insight is given, it will help any borrower to improve its macroeconomic or governance fundamentals. And then this credit rating process will become more acceptable to any country. Further, these credit rating agencies they should also look to improve the accuracy or transparency of their day-to-day functioning. Because when these ratings are more accurate and transparent in nature, it will lead to increased credit ratings as far as developing nations are concerned. And why it is essential? Because these developing nations they are more responsible, or they are borrowing more from foreign markets, and an improvement in their credit rating will mean that their borrowing cost will reduce as far as borrowing is concerned. And with this reduced borrowing, these developed countries they can invest more and more in their social and infrastructural needs. Further, any country, specifically India, it should enhance the level of scrutiny that these credit rating agencies are subjected to in general. Because recently, or back in 2008, when these credit rating agencies they reduced the credit rating of US, the regulators in the US they scrutinized various aspects of these credit rating agencies. And because of this, various levels of non-transparent workings were brought to attention. And when similarly India enhances its scrutiny over these credit rating agencies, it will also force them to undertake changes in their day-to-day functioning. Hence, by reducing the amount of subjectivity that these credit rating agencies use, and by giving insights and guidance to any borrower will help these credit rating agencies and their credit ratings make more acceptable or more acceptable to the borrowers in general. Further, with improved accuracy and transparency, it will also lead to reduction in credit ratings by the or improvement in credit ratings as far as developing nations are concerned. Further, with enhanced scrutiny, these credit rating agencies will ensure that they will work in a more transparent or accurate manner as possible. Hence, this was all for credit rating agencies. And with this, let me conclude today's edition of Daily News Simplified. Hence, any student who has a doubt as far as this discussion is concerned, please ask me in the comment section down below. Now, as there are no doubts right here, if any student feels that they have a doubt, you can ask this doubt in the comment section down below, and our team will try to address those doubts at the earliest time possible. Hence, with this, let me conclude our today's discussion of Daily News Simplified, and you have a great weekend, and I wish you a very good night.